I will say, though,
It's isolating,
it
isn't
is
it?
isolating. We don't get people from the power company coming and traipsing around on our property.
Checking our meter every month.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
We
it,
did.
it gets pretty lonely out here.
Yeah. We won't talk about all the friends and all the people that we have coming over. I hope you come visit us.
Yeah.
But like it just
So if you're
less social.
if you're best friends with the meter man, then you probably don't want to go off
Yeah.
the grid.
No.
The Ready Life. Into the country.
Hi, I'm Lisa Meisner.
And I'm Nick, her husband.
Welcome back to the Ready Life podcast, where you'll learn how to make your home and family as independent as possible for basic necessities like water, heat, food, and the power that most of us depend on. Today, we are going to be looking at 4 myths about living off the grid. It's interesting. What made me think about this is this last weekend we were visiting some very, very dear friends of ours who live off the grid now. And while we were making popcorn, she was making it on the stove. We got to talking about, how lazy I am. I like my hot air popcorn popper. I just throw it in and out comes the popcorn. And she's over there, doing this back and forth on the stovetop. And she laughed and she said, yeah, when they were getting ready to move to this house, which was off the grid, she'd never lived off the grid before. And so she wasn't packing any of her, electronic appliances or hot air popcorn popper. She's like, yeah, I used to have one. And the waffle iron and the Vitamix and all of the things that we really enjoy using, all those electronics. And it hit me, that, of course, now that she's living off grid, she's like, man, I wish I had known what living off the grid was really like. I would have brought all of those appliances with me. And we kind of had a bit of a chuckle because that's one of the major myths about living off the grid is that you can't bring all of these electronics because you have limited power and you can't this and that and the other thing. And here we were laughing over a pot of popcorn that she was doing the old-fashioned way on the stovetop because of this myth, this misunderstanding that so many folks have that she had before she moved off the grid. And so today we decided to tackle some of these myths about living off the grid and talk about what it's really like.
That's right. And, I think that folks who are going to find this especially interesting is if you have some degree of interest in going off the grid, but maybe you're just thinking that you'd have to give up too much. But also, I'll have to say, even if you already live off the grid, this episode I think is going to be really valuable for you because we've been surprised at how many folks who live off the grid but live in a way that's very different than the way that we live, in a more rustic way, shall we say, which is fine if you choose to live that way, but we just want you to know that you don't have to. And then also, if going off the grid isn't even on your radar, you barely know what it means, and you've heard the term batted around, but you haven't even considered it as an option, I think you'll find this episode to be really useful too.
Yeah, you're picturing your grandmother out there with a washboard.
Right. So why do we think that we can't go off the grid?
Well, I mentioned there are 4 myths that we want to tackle today. So let's just highlight them real quick, and then we'll dig into each one.
Sounds good.
So the first one I've already alluded to with my story, the laugh that my friend and I had over the popcorn, and that's that, people, when they think about living off the grid, they kind of think like they're going to have to live sort of in the dark ages, like that picture of your grandmother with the washboard outside washing your clothes, or, oil lamps, or, do you have a toilet? I've been asked that question. Do you have a flushing toilet? It's like, well, actually, flushing toilets don't require electricity, but the water does, right? The flow of water.
For most water systems.
That's true.
Yeah.
For some, they don't. But still, no. The answer is no. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Myth number 2, it's too inconvenient. which is kind of related to the first one. I'm going to be living in the dark ages, but it's a little bit different.
It's going to take too much work and too much trouble.
Yeah,
whatever.
right. Another one, I'm all alone.
Oh, yes. Isolated. Off-grid and isolation seem to often be tied together when people are talking about living an off-grid lifestyle. It sounds very isolating, and it's very much not.
Yeah, the term off-grid has taken on a life of its own. Now it can even just mean something as simple as turning your cell phone off. I went off the grid.
That's true. And the last one that we want to look at is it's too expensive. Which a lot of people just think that, oh yeah, going off the grid, the cost of solar panels and all the equipment and everything is just sky high. That's way out of reach, out of our budget. We could never. So yeah, let's dive into them. So the dark ages. So first of all, living off the grid does not mean rugged living. I'm thinking outhouses, no running water.
Not necessarily, at least.
Yes, not necessarily. It doesn't have to be.
It can look however you want it to look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But living on the grid, you can do the same thing.
Sure.
You can use a washboard. I did actually when I was a kid. It's a very long story, but we lived on the grid, mind you, and we were using a washboard to wash our laundry with.
For a period of time.
Because my parents were all done going to laundromats, and because 3 kids out in the country, we went through a lot
while you were waiting for a new home, right?
Yes,
something like that. Okay, so it was a temporary thing.
Yeah, it was a temporary thing, but still, I've done it. But that was on the grid, so you can live that kind of a lifestyle no matter where you are, off grid, on grid, and living off the grid doesn't mean
dirty,
grungy, and big long beards, and nothing.
Duck Dynasty
wrong.
beards.
Yes. Nothing wrong with long beards or getting dirty. Obviously, my kids get very, very dirty, but hygiene is important, and off grid doesn't have to look like any of those things.
That's
also,
right.
Living off the grid does not mean you have to give up things you enjoy, like sewing. For example, sewing and hot air popcorn poppers.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring up the sewing machine, because some of the newer sophisticated sewing machines do require very clean electricity, but with the power that our power system produces, it's perfectly clean, just as good as the power that you get on the grid, and it's not any kind of a problem at all. If anything, our power might be even cleaner. I know we have friends that have sewing machines, and they've got these sophisticated surge protectors on them to protect their expensive sewing machines from potential surges in the grid. And so, yeah.
Because, but, like you said, our power is just as clean, if not maybe even cleaner. And then living off the grid doesn't necessarily mean homesteading. A lot of people think off-grid living is homesteading. In other words, you live off the grid, you have to have the chickens and the goats and the cow and, the big pasture.
And the YouTube channel.
And the YouTube channel. Yes. Yes, and that's not necessarily what off-the-grid living or off-grid means. It doesn't mean homesteading. And I love homesteading. We do homesteading. And we live off the grid. They're two different things.
Yeah, homesteading is very focused on food and, growing, raising, preserving food, all things food.
And a YouTube channel.
Yes. But off-grid is about electricity and producing your own power. Basically, off-grid simply means that you're not connected to the power lines.
That's right.
That's basically what it means. And so when we say an off-grid power system, that's talking about a power system that produces your own power without being connected to the power company.
And living off-grid can look like any and all of the things that we've talked about. But it just simply means that you're not connected to the power company.
So what are some of the things that you use, you and we, but I'm just thinking specifically you, because you have a lot of things in the kitchen that you use. What are, just to give folks a picture of what it looks like.
Yeah, now I just have to say this. I've said this a number of times, but if you came to my home and visited us, which we would love to have everyone come visit us, but if you came to my home and visited us, you would have no idea that we lived off the grid.
That's right.
Our lifestyle is just the same as yours. It's just we source our power from a different place than yours. So it's true. I have the blender and the juicer and the hot air popcorn popper and the KitchenAid and the Vitamix, the KitchenAid and the Vitamix. We have a stove and an oven. We have a fridge. We have 2 freezers. We have, I could keep going. We have an almond cow, which makes our almond milk in the morning because we really like almond milk. And what was it recently? Waffle iron. I just got a waffle iron because we really like waffles. And I had one at one point. And anyway, long story.
It got destroyed.
We've got internet, laptops, cell phones, fans. And yes, I have a hot shower. A very hot shower. I like hot showers. Washer, dryer, blow dryer, and yes, I use a blow dryer and a straight iron and a curling iron, electric toothbrush, electric razor, humidifiers. We have what are the essential oil diffusers,
power tools.
Yeah, heating pad, sewing machine, like we mentioned earlier, and we could keep going.
Yeah, that was not an exhaustive list.
No, this is just off the top of my head. Microphones, lights. We have a whole studio, and yes, it is running off the grid.
That's right. So, our life just isn't much different than yours. It really is the way that we do this. So it is almost the same as yours, but it's a little bit different in that we choose our appliances carefully. So we've got almost all of the appliances that you have, but instead of just waltzing into Home Depot and picking up whatever is the prettiest thing, we're looking at
that washer's so pretty, I want it.
Yeah. Instead of that, we're looking at the power usage and we're saying, okay, we're going to get a washing machine, which is the most efficient one that will do the job that we need. And
I want these bells and whistles, right? So I had my little wish list for my washing machine, and then we just found a washing machine that had the bells and whistles that I wanted, but still used the least amount of power.
Right. And, with the refrigerator and the freezer, there's certain things that can waste a lot of power, and so we're more picky about those. The things that you use the most, you want to be the pickiest about. And the things that you use the least are less important. The popcorn popper, it runs for 3 minutes, and we do that maybe once a week. So the amount of power that it's used, even though it uses a lot while it's running, the cumulative amount of power is infinitesimal. It's so small.
But then something like a fan, for example, which a ceiling fan, which is something that you might have on 24/7 or maybe 12 hours, 7 days a week. That's using it's using maybe a little less power than your hot air popcorn power, a lot less power probably, but it's on all the time. So
it could be if you use it that way.
Yeah, if you use it that way. Yeah. And so then you would want to be sure that something you're using more often, you get energy efficient instead of just, it looks cute, I want this one.
Right. So I'm trying to be really transparent here because we could just say, we live exactly like you. And it's true because if you were to live here, it would be almost the same as the way that you live. It's just that there's more thought and care that's gone into the specific model of appliances that we chose and that sort of thing.
Just a little more research.
Yeah, right. So, but that's the big thing. Some folks think, well, it's got to be really inconvenient.
Yeah, because you're producing your own power.
To live off the grid.
That must be a lot of work a lot of inconvenience. Tongue in cheek, it's terribly inconvenient. I mean, think about it. We have to water the batteries because ours are lead acid. If you get a different type of battery, like a lithium,
which are the rage these
then
days.
You don't even have to do that. Watering the batteries, though, it takes maybe 10 minutes and you only do it maybe 3-4 times a year max.
Right.
So basically it's like watering a plant. It's not that much work. Another thing is you need to make sure that the batteries are fully charged once every, 10 days or something.
Once
but
again,
really,
that's a lead acid thing again.
yeah, it's a lead acid
So
thing.
you wouldn't even have either of those if you had a...
If you did a lithium.
Yeah.
And really, there's electronics that really track all of that for you. So you don't even have to be like stressing, oh no, has it been 10 days in this? I don't think about it.
So another thing that is just incredibly time consuming and difficult and makes life miserable is about maybe 3 or 4 times a winter I have to go out with a push broom that has an extension pole and brush the solar panels off.
Oh, it's so...
And that takes it takes a really long time, like 3 minutes, something like that.
We won't talk about how long it took us to shovel off the roof of the house.
Oh my. You do. And another thing that you might really miss is there's certain pieces of monthly mail that you're going to be really feeling lonely and lonesome. They come from the power company every month. And
yeah, we do miss out on those power bills.
I don't even know what they look like.
That's true.
Yeah,
it's
been so long.
I actually don't. Yeah, because I've always lived off the grid with you since we got married. So yeah, I will say though,
it's isolating, isn't it?
It is isolating. We don't get people from the power company coming and traipsing around on our property.
Checking our meter every month.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it gets pretty lonely out here.
Yeah. We won't talk about all the friends and all the people that we have coming over. I hope you come visit us.
Yeah.
But it just
so if you're
less social.
If you're best friends with the meter man, then you probably don't want to go off the grid.
No.
And other things, just getting a little bit more back to reality, we'll do things like turn the light off when we leave the room, not because we have to, but just we try and instill a habit of efficiency, of thriftiness, of not being wasteful. Because when you're making your own power, and power is a limited resource, then it teaches good lessons of not being wasteful. And I think that too often we have an attitude of wastefulness. Just because there's a seemingly unlimited supply that you just have to pay more for, that doesn't mean that you have to just use it just because it's there. And I think these are good habits.
I was just trying to think if I turned the light off in the bathroom when I left this morning after my shower.
I know.
I'm not really great at that one. I have to. He's much better about it than I am. But
that's just one example. The lights, but it's just an overall.
It's the principle of the matter.
I'm trying to create habits of, what shall we say, of not being wasteful. What's the opposite of wasteful? I'm not thinking of the word.
I'm drawing a blank too.
Anyhow.
You guys understand.
Fill in the blank.
But even if you're on the grid, I know of a lot of families that live on the grid and power's expensive or whatever, and so they're always getting after the kids, turn the light off, It's just kind of, it like you said, it's just a principle of not being wasteful.
I treat it kind of like food,
Yeah.
We try and train our kids to not be wasteful with food. Only put on your plate what you are going to eat. And if you put it on your plate, you have to eat it. That's just kind of a rule. So be careful about what you put on your plate, because we don't want to be wasteful with anything, really. Yes,
that's very true. Speaking of isolation, which we just mentioned, you're not going to have that power meter man visiting. We often hear a connection between living off the grid and being lonely or isolated.
Which those two are not related in any way necessarily.
They're not, actually. If you think about it for just a minute, I lived on the grid and I was living all alone for a little while. And it was the most empty, lonely, frustrating feeling. Loneliness is something that I think is just built into the human fabric. We were created for companionship. I mean, that's why God created families and marriages and friendships. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Nobody wants to be lonely.
But disconnecting from the power company does not affect your social life.
Except with the meter man.
That's true. That's true. Yes.
But I mean, we have so many friends and a wonderful church family and people coming out here to visit us, and we need a bigger home. Really, we need a bigger home. Because we love companionship and friends. And, you know, just because you live off the grid doesn't mean that you live out in the boondocks or that you live isolated.
And I think that's what people are thinking when they say off grid in connection with that. They're thinking way out in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
And yes, that can have an impact on your social life, because if all your friends have to drive an hour each way to get to your house, then you're probably not going to have as many friends that stop by on a daily basis or something like that. But the point is, off-grid means disconnected from the power company, and that has no relation to whether
your location.
To your social life other than the meter man.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So what is our next one?
Our next one is
expensive.
It's too expensive.
So,
This is kind of your cup of tea.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we kind of disproved that whole thing ourselves.
Yep.
You've probably heard of the folks that have gotten quotes for $80,000, $120,000. That was the highest I had heard of for years. But then just a couple months ago, I
we were
talked
doing
to
a class online,
right,
and we had somebody that came and joined us.
$240,000.
Quoted. Speechless.
And so, yes, you can definitely go the expensive route if you want to. But we proved years ago that it doesn't have to be that way. You can do this on a limited budget. And there's a number of techniques. We can't get into all that. That's another topic for another episode. And I'm pretty sure that we've done at least 1 or 2 episodes in the past on that.
Yeah, we'll try and link to some of them below.
Yeah. But we're certainly not made of money. And so we'll just give you some of the like maybe, let's say the top 3 strategies that we used for doing this with a reasonable budget. And so number 1 would be, and this is like the biggest thing I could say, is to become as energy efficient as possible. The average American home uses about 30 kilowatt hours per day of electricity. 30. Now, we've found it quite possible and very feasible to live with much, much, much less than that, just a fraction of that, like 10% of that. Our power usage has creeped up a bit as our family has gotten bigger and older, and all of the kids have gotten older and all of that. And we have a budding electrician in our midst.
Which I love.
Who's using all kinds of electric things and all that. So we're probably using a little more than 3 kilowatt hours a day, but still somewhere in that range of 2 to 5 is where we've ranged over the years. And we've done that without making any dramatic changes to our lifestyle. And we were touching on this earlier.
Yes.
It really boils down to a great extent on your choice of appliances.
Yes.
Not necessarily doing without, just choosing the most efficient options that you can. And with for instance your water heater, you're not going to use an electric water heater. There's the big 4 that we talk about a lot, and we're talking electric water heater, electric clothes dryer, electric oven or range, and then the big one, an electric HVAC system, air heating and air conditioning system in your home. With those 4,
massive amounts of power.
Yeah, massive amounts, and there's great alternatives for each of those where you can still live very comfortably, but just not be using massive amounts of electricity. You can accomplish those same things with other options. We'll leave it at that. I'm not going to jump too deeply into that.
Another thing you can do too is to just take it one step at a time. I mean, that's what you guys did when you and your parents first went off the grid. And that's what we did even when we moved here, is we just took it one step at a time. And yeah, over the course of, a few years, we were able to install a really good quality system that has worked well for our family. Even with our budding electricians in the midst.
But, it can be as simple as starting out with just a generator and a transfer switch. And the transfer switch is what enables your home to connect to both the power company and the generator, but not be connected at the same time, to switch back and forth in a safe way so that you don't electrocute a lineman that's trying to get your power back up. So that would be a good first step for some folks. And then, step 2 could be to where that generator hooks into the transfer switch to build a little off-grid system with batteries and an inverter, so that instead of having to run that generator all the time to have power, you can use the batteries to store power, run the generator for a little while, for a few hours to charge the batteries up, and then you've got power 24/7 whenever you need it, and you can still switch back and forth if you want. And then, so that would be kind of step 2, and then step 3 to add some solar, a small solar array. Step 4, add more solar if you want. Or, you could break this up into a number of steps, and it enables you to end up with a good system that's quality, but and it still isn't necessarily going to cost a ton of money, but it breaks it into bite-sized chunks that are more swallowable. Is that a word?
It is now.
But another thing you can do is, and this is huge, is to design your own system. And this is the thing that if I were to line up all the people that have had issues with going off the grid and find the most common denominator, it would be that they didn't get a proper system design. They didn't properly design their system. And so they had no idea how much power they were using, how much power they needed to make, and how much power they were capable of making. They just, bought a package system or called up a retailer and had them do one of their little freebie, quote unquote, designs that are, in my opinion, kind of ridiculous, because there's a number of local factors that some long distance retailer can't take into effect. Things like shade. And also, most of them don't do a very good job of taking your solar climate into account. In other words, how cloudy it is, how during different months of the year, how long your days are in different months of the year. Up north, the days get pretty short in the winter, and things like that. So there's a lot of factors like this that you need to take into account. And the way that you can do that is you can either try and find somebody and pay them a ton of money to do a good, thorough system design, or you can do it yourself, and it's totally feasible to do. In fact, we did a accelerator, and there's a whole course in the Ready Life Academy on that very topic, where with just putting an hour or 2 per week, we were thinking of busy people, just putting an hour or 2 per week in roughly a month, you could have your system designed. And if you were able to do more than an hour or 2 per week, you could get it done much faster than that. It was just trying to spread it out.
And I have to jump in and say this, because I'm not I'm not an electrician, for starters, and I'm about the furthest thing from it. And I'm a housewife, and I love my job, but I'm not like the most techie person to try and figure all of this out. But he is such a good teacher, and he built a calculator where all you have to do is just go through the lessons and collect the data. It walks you through how to do it, and you input that data. And then once you've inputted all that data, then you know exactly how many solar panels you need to support your current lifestyle, what size of a battery bank you need. And then you can call up the a solar retailer or something and say, this is what I need. I need this much, battery capacity. I need this many solar panels. This is what I need. And guys, I can do it. And if I can do it. I know you can do it too. So
You've designed a number of systems
Exactly.
for friends.
I have, only because I was using his calculator.
right.
So yeah, it's entirely feasible. You can totally do it off grid. So are those all 4 of the
I think so.
myths?
I believe so. Yep.
Very good.
It was,
Oh yeah.
I'll have to live like I'm in the dark ages.
We
It's
know
too,
that's not true.
Yep, it's too inconvenient.
Yep.
I'm all alone, and it's too expensive.
That's right.
Yep.
That's
So, anyhow.
Now the myths are gone.
That's right. That's right. So, I guess one last thing that comes to mind is why do we live off the grid?
That's true.
That's a fair question. Back in the 90s, from my end, back in the 90s, we moved to remote property. We had a very limited budget and needed to find inexpensive property. And we wanted to be, we wanted that kind of a lifestyle, remote, and we actually wanted off the grid. We weren't sure, we'd never lived that way before, but we knew people who had, and we liked the advantages of it. We were looking for independence. We were feeling the pressure of control that was being exerted on America, and how almost everyone was completely dependent upon huge corporations and government entities and things like this for basic necessities. And we felt like that was a really bad idea, considering the times that we're living in. We believe the end times. And when you look at Bible prophecy and things like this.
Well, like that verse in Revelation that says that no man might buy or sell except he that has the mark of the beast, right?
This is going to be used to manipulate people.
Exactly.
These,
the ability to buy your power so that way you can heat your house, or the ability to go to the grocery store and get your food,
right,
is going to be used to manipulate you into going along with what the devil has in mind. And
so we were looking for independence, and part of that meant living off the grid. And so we were able to find land for cheaper because it was off the grid. You should be paying less for off-grid land because it's going to cost money to either run power in, a lot of money, a lot of times, to run power in, or to set up an off-grid system. And so we were able to get inexpensive land and all of that, and build and set up a off-grid power system. And we learned a lot in the School of Hard Knocks. We didn't have anybody to teach us this stuff, and it was back in those days. It was more expensive, and there was very minimal. It wasn't as much. There weren't as many options out there for equipment, and it wasn't as reliable, and all of this. But it was what we chose, what we wanted, and we loved it. I mean, bit by the bug. I still have a picture of my dad and I throwing the switch for the power on and the off-grid power system for the first time.
It's empowering.
It is to take control of some of these basic needs that you have. It's really, really cool.
So we busted these myths wide open.
That's right.
So now you know you can actually go off the grid.
That's right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this, and we'll see you next week. Take care now.
Bye.